Hey guys! So, in this video I'm going to talk a little bit about my first impressions of using CSS Grid. And hopefully, since I'm smiling, I am maybe giving away a little bit of the ending here. It's absolutely amazing. I am so blown away of how gorgeously amazing it has worked for me. I had the great opportunity of basically what I'm doing right now is that I'm working on a story to implement a administrative panel which holds a lot of different components, and the layout is virtually, it's a two-column layout, a split two-column layout with like sidebars and like all kinds of good stuff. And so I decided, I knew that my first thought was, yeah, okay, I'll start making some wrappers so I can get some containers going, so I can use Flexbox for doing the layout basically. And then I kind of stopped and just thought, no, you know what? Rachel Ander has worked well, not only Rachel of course, but she's worked hard for this, and I watched a lot of her tutorials, and I'm gonna do it. I'm gonna use CSS Grid because there's no, the support is good, and this is like an internal system. It's not so important that it works across like older, like really old browsers. So I'm gonna do it. I'm gonna try it out, and I basically started putting out my grid. And the first thing I have to say that I absolutely love is, as has been stated to me in previous videos, is that this approach of solving the problem is from the container in, if you will, where I could I very quickly got a grid going, which made everything looked exactly as I wanted it to, and I could place all my elements very easily. I didn't have to do any fancy container, you know how it is with Flexbox, since it's you need to wrap elements in containers, and you need to to position them, and all of that stuff. Almost no bloat was in my HTML. I didn't have to wrap nothing. Virtually nothing needed to be added in order for me to get the layout that I wanted. CSS Grid just took care of it. I was so impressed and so happy. And honestly, the only thing that I've so far found that I didn't like, that I thought was a little bit tricky with CSS Grid, was that it became a little bit, since we're working in React land and everything's a component and so forth, because it makes, to me it makes a lot of sense that you would put your container specification for the CSS for your container, and also then you would put, because they're kind of associated, to me mentally they feel associated. I think that in order for me to, if you're creating a component and you declare it to be a part of a grid, then you kind of have to know about the grid, because if you're doing a row template which is going to span a certain amount of fractions or rows or so forth, it kind of makes sense to you to know what the grid is going to look like. And so for me it felt very natural that all that went into the same file, which kind of breaks a little bit of this component isolation mentality that I so really enjoy about React, where I like to put everything as close as possible to the source of the information, basically centralizing everything that has to do with a component. And if you're putting styles that are going to be on one of these, one of the components in your grid, in the same place as the grid itself is, that kind of breaks that pattern. It's not a big thing. It's just maybe it's me being a little bit anal about semantics and so forth, because it didn't actually provide much of an issue. I could fix it. I think it just gave me a little bit of a I wish I could do this a little bit nicer. It was nothing major. Apart from that, it has been an absolutely delight to work with CSS Grid. And when I was actually so overwhelmed with how well I could structure my layout, that once the layout was in place, I had some internal layouts. I had basically these boxes that were gonna hold some forms and stuff like that. And so I just went for the next thing. I started nesting because you can do that as well. It's not just for putting positioning, your overall layout. I started actually making, yeah, form layouts basically. It almost felt like doing table layouts like back in the day, but in a much nicer. Like I don't feel dirty when I do a grid layout as I did when I did table layouts for forms back in the day. So yeah, this is just really appreciation. I really encourage you to try out CSS Grid. It's it's very, very powerful. I am amazed at how well it works. It is really cool. It takes a little bit of time to get used to the syntax, but I kind of got I think that I got like the most of. I think I got it down in virtually like half a day, and now I feel fairly like I'm not an expert, of course, but I feel very comfortable using it, and I'm pretty sure that it's gonna become my go-to, my default way of solving these problems, because I was scared that I would just try it once and then I would go back to Flexbox and doing all things the old way, because I didn't think that it was it wasn't giving me all that value. But I've been so sold on this that I have to just say that yeah, I don't think I have any problem just using this for virtually any type of layout that I want to do, and I hope you find the same thing. So I encourage you, go and try it out. There's so many good tutorials for grid layout, and it's really, really, really elegant and nice to work with.